Hi, beautiful beings. I'm lying down because it's just been such an epic day of discovery, and I really wanted to share before I went to bed. So, in a religious context and in many spiritual paths, death is the great enlightener. Death is the doorway to heaven. Death is the grand release to the next experience. And yet the fear of death is so pervasive in humanity because it's the fear of the deep unknown. It's the fear of annihilation. It's the fear of non-existence. It's the fear of what will become of me after all this. Yet the fear of death is the grand release into the next experience of life and a form of heavenly experience. So when we translate that into this ascension and awakening process, we can see that the death of the programs, the death of the anxiety, the death of the familiar reality that's holding us into this constricted duality, the death of all those spaces is the access point to being born into heaven on earth, to being initiated into an expanded state of wholeness. And that's why so much arises through the ego, through the holding on, through the grasping, through the longing, through the avoiding of truly dealing with those triggers. Because it feels like death. It feels like the ultimate dissolution when part of ourselves that we've clung onto so tightly to define who we are and our existence is coming up for questioning, is coming up for dissolution. And we resist it. We resist the deep work. And we sit with the program, and we sit with the duality and the separation and the longing and the anxiety and the fear and the anger and all the stuff. Because the fear of letting it go is so great, just like the fear of death. But what we need to believe and know to be true is once we finally put those programs to rest, once we finally feel through the completion of them and surrender them, then we truly are in a position to experience heaven on earth. And heaven on earth is living in wholeness in the present moment without being driven by the program, addiction, and all the other stuff that comes with it. So instead of reacting, instead of pushing back, instead of forcing, instead of pressuring, instead of chasing some form of avoidance or abandoning self or abandoning others, or living in this state of perpetual discontent, that's the space where you most fear to do the work, the space where you will feel the most discomfort if you let that program go. Because then who will you be? You'll be liberated, but you'll be in a space that's unknown to you, a space you've never experienced before, and potentially haven't experienced in the consciousness of your soul through its journey, in this expression, in this life, on this earth. So if you truly want to ascend and truly want to create that experience of heaven on earth, then coming to terms with death is a huge piece of that. Coming to terms with the greatness of the end point, that's the beginning point at the same time, that holds both energies simultaneously, and that is driven by our old patterns of fear that has been held in a fearful space for so long. When we can free ourselves from that fear and allow ourselves to be brave enough to face it, to die to ourselves, then we truly have the potential of anchoring in a whole new reality of the nowness, of the great eternal love of right now in this moment. So when the fear arises of sitting in the pain, of sitting in the anguish, of sitting in the loss, of the abandonment, of the fear, of the addiction, of all of that, know that you are effectively at the threshold of heaven on earth, of being free. Sending love, sending light. No, you are not alone.